the herbicide did not skip Jerusalem, which quickly changed from the Eternal City, as a recent book by Salim Tamari puts it, into a phantom city. Jewish troops sailed, attacked, and occupied the western Arab neighborhoods in April 1948. Some of the richer Palestinian inhabitants of these more affluent sections had left town a few weeks before. The rest were expelled from houses that still testify to the architectural beauty of the neighborhoods the Palestinian elite had started building outside the walls of the old city by the end of the 19th century. In recent years, some of these masterpieces have begun to disappear. Real estate fervor, architectural eccentricism, and constructors' greed have combined to transform these elegant residential areas into streets of monstrous villas and extravagant palaces for rich American Jews who tend to flock to the city in their old age. The British troops were still in Palestine when these areas were cleansed and occupied, but they remained aloof and did not intervene. Only in one area, Saich Jarrah, the first Palestinian neighborhood built outside the old city's walls, were the leading notable families such as the Hussainis, the Nassasibis, and the Khalidis had their domicile, did a local British commander decide to step in. The instruction to the Jewish forces was very clear in April 1948: occupy the neighborhood and destroy all its houses. The cleansing attack began on 24 April 1948 but was halted by the British before it could be fully implemented. We have vital testimony of what happened in Saich Jarrah from the Secretary of the Arab Higher Committee, Dr. Hussein Khalidi, who lived there. His desperate telegrams to the Mufti were often intercepted by the Israeli intelligence and are kept in the Israeli archives. Khalidi reports how the British commander's troops saved the neighborhood, with the exception of the 20 houses the Haganah succeeded in blowing up. This confrontational British stance here indicates how very different the fate of many Palestinians would have been had British troops elsewhere intervened, as both the imperatives of the Mandatory Charter and the terms of the UN Partition Resolution required them to do. British inaction was the rule, however, as Khalidi's frantic appeals highlight as regards the rest of the Jerusalemite neighborhoods, especially in the western part of the city. These areas had come under repeated selling from the first day of January, and here, unlike in Sheikh Jarrah, the British played a truly diabolical role as they disarmed the few Palestinian residents who had weapons, promising to protect the people against Jewish attacks, but then instantly reneged on that promise. In one of his telegraphs in early January, Dr. Khalidi reported to Al Hajj Amin in Cairo how almost every day a crowd of angry citizens would demonstrate in front of his house seeking leadership and calling for help. Doctors in the crowd told Khalidi that the hospitals were overcrowded with the injured and that they were running out of shrouds to cover the dead bodies. There was total anarchy and people were in a state of panic. But worse was to come. A few days after the aborted attack on Saich Jarrah, with the help of the same 3-inch mortar bombs used in Haifa, Palestinian northern and western Jerusalem were hammered by endless shelling. Only Shufat, held on and refused to surrender. Katamon fell in the last days of April. Yitzhak Levy, the head of the Haganah intelligence in Jerusalem, recalls: while the cleansing of Katamon went on, pillage and robbery began. Soldiers and citizens took part in it. They broke into the houses and took from them furniture, clothing, electric equipment, and food. The entry of the Jordanian Arab Legion into the fighting changed the picture, and the cleansing operations were halted in the middle of May 1948. Some Jordanians were involved in the fighting before as volunteers, and their contribution had helped slow down the Jewish advance, especially during the takeover of Katamon, which involved intensive fighting with Jewish troops in the monastery of San Simon. But despite their heroic, in the description of Levi and his friends, attempt to defend the Palestinian neighborhoods of the West, they failed. All in all, 8 Palestinian neighborhoods and 39 villages were ethnically cleansed in the Greater Jerusalem area, their population transferred to the eastern part of the city. The villages are all gone today, but some of Jerusalem's most beautiful houses are still standing, now inhabited by Jewish families who took them over immediately after their eviction, silent reminders of the tragic fate of the people who used to own them.